Moving on to our next session, the Fireside Chat on how India can handle the oncoming data explosion and exponential growth that we are all witnessing today. On this Fireside Chat panel, we have joining us Mr. Srikant Sastri, Chairperson, Geospatial Data Promotion and Development Committee. Srikant Shastri dons many hats as the board member, advisor, mentor at a range of companies and universities. At fast growing companies, he helps CEOs and owners navigate through the challenges and opportunities in an uncertain world. As a mentor and advisor, he guides them in incubating new ideas, initiatives, and ventures that bring in growth. May I invite Mr. Srikant Shastri on stage? Our next member for the Fireside Chat, Mr. Kamal Nath, CEO, Sify Technologies. Kamal Nath is an entrepreneurial mindset-driven CEO with 30 years of experience in the IT, communications, cloud, and digital industry, known for his proven expertise in organizational transformation, growth, and building diverse businesses and teams. As CEO, he has successfully led Sify's transformation from an enterprise network and data center service provider to a converged ICT solutions and services organization. Welcome, sir. And the session will be moderated by Minu Sirsalewala, Executive Editor, CyberMedia. Over to you, Minu.
Thank you so much. A very good evening, gentlemen and ladies. And to my esteemed speakers, we have been listening a lot about the way India is poised to be a tech superpower. We all have been listening a lot about cybersecurity, AI, and what does all this ride on? I think it's data, and data, as we know, is the new currency. We've been talking about how data is the way ahead, where everything is surrounded on the data explosion that we're talking about. So we have with us Mr. Srikant and Mr. Kamal, and we are trying to get the conversation and have some clarity on where this data explosion is really coming from and how to handle this data explosion. So we've heard that there are 175 zettabytes of data being produced, the trillions of data that we are generating at every day that we have been talking about and moving ahead. So kind of getting an understanding from the stalwarts here is that how is this data really being managed, stored, and maybe also getting some intelligence to this existing data, which is the currency as we go ahead. So if I can start with, any of you all can take the lead, that where do you see this explosion really coming from?
Yeah, so I think all of us, most of us know over here where it is coming from. With mobile phone and with apps like Instagram in everybody's hand, and we know what is happening with the reels nowadays, right? So that's one dimension of it. But I think, in the earlier days, data was actually getting generated inside data center in the database, right? More some user data getting generated, but most of the data today is getting generated outside the data center and getting stored in the data center, right? So be it, the consumers like us who wants to do everything through mobile, and in fact, we must do everything through mobile. And I'm sure during the whole day, mobile and digital came up multiple times. But outside human beings, the actors, other actors, around whom this data, data creation, I'm not talking about data consumption or data creation will happen, are actually the machines, right? So machines are pretty much a part of the enterprise today. It is not only the human beings, right? And more and more, every piece of digitalization which will happen, it will be in the form of data. So data is the form factor of digital, isn't it, right? And obviously, it leads to the next step. Where will all this data get stored? So I want to also hear Sunil's view on that.
No, Kamal, you spoke about consumers and machines generating data. I want to speak about some of the other big sources. So over the last 10 years, I've been deeply exposed to two sectors. One is enterprises across the world, and second is the government. If you look at where the largest quantum of data is being generated and collected, number one is actually the government. In the previous two sessions, we heard from Arvind and Saransh. 900 million digital users. Imagine the kind of data being generated. Where is that data going? The UPI data, the Aadhaar data, most of it goes to the government. So that's the biggest source for data across the world where it's being generated. The second one is actually platforms. Amazon, Facebook, Google, Netflix, they are the ones who generate a lot of data because they have literally billions of users. That's the second big source where the data is sitting. And the third is enterprises. I mean, every bank, he spoke about the fact that SBI has several 100 million customers. There's so much of data. Airlines, saw someone from Vistara here. Airlines have data, banks have data, hotels have data, telcos have data. Now they're all sitting within enterprise systems. So those are three big sources of data. And then, of course, the machines and consumers that he spoke about. I think one word before we move on, if you look at these people who own the data, where is data most sophisticated? The government has a ton of data, but it's probably not as well organized, usable as you would like it to be. Platforms like Amazon, Netflix, Google's, Facebook are the ones who are super organized. For them, data is not just a way of targeting advertising. For them, data is a way of deriving intelligence and rolling out better products. For example, today, all of us take Facebook photos for granted. But the fact is, once upon a time, photos is not a feature on Facebook. Facebook looked at data and saw people uploading photos and sharing photos. They realized that photos could be a product feature. So they build better features based on that. And those better features get more customers and more data. So it becomes a virtuous data cycle. So they're very sophisticated. Enterprises, some of them are good at it, some of them are not so good at it, and I'm sure Som will vouch for it. Not every enterprise which has hundreds of millions of customers of data uses it well. Very often they're sitting in silos. They might create data warehouses, but at most they might use it for visualization and dashboarding and nothing more than that. Some others, some airlines, some banks are very smart at using the data. So that's the broad landscape for where the data comes from and where is it most promising actually.
Absolutely. So,
I want to add one more thing. I think one of the big changes which is already happening and is going to happen more and more is the form factor of the content. It is no longer images, right? It is a video. The video is going to completely shatter the ceiling, right? I mean, everybody uploading videos or even the contents are mostly videos nowadays, right?
So
We-
reels and shorts.
Yeah,
and kind of
yeah,
content
and
that
very
we-
immersive, right? I mean,
Right,
anybody
yes.
getting hooked to it, that becomes the choice of the content, the media of the content, right?
Yes.
I think video is going to change, and more importantly, with 5G, kind of deployment, and it is getting more popular. And when the real 5G speed will happen, that will also mean that it will move from video to virtual reality, right? I mean, when VR comes into action,
Absolutely.
okay, then the whole game is going to change, much more significant.
That's true.
Yeah.
So, we are talking about the unstructured data and this data explosion we do understand. So, Kamal, coming to this very important question, like how do you manage this data? How would you say the enterprise is doing that intelligently? What are the tools kind of being used? And then maybe asking Sir, give an example because you are sitting on this data bomb, and how do you manage this kind of a data?
See, I would like you to little recalibrate your question.
Mhm.
The reason being, we don't manage customers' data. I mean, if you are asking
I'm-
me,
From the
from my
storage
position,
perspective,
yeah,
storage
correct. So
perspective,
let me
yes.
give you two perspectives on that. So this kind of data volume which is getting created, it is creating a major impact and a positive impact on the data center side, right?
Absolutely.
And data center will play. Data center is actually the epicenter of the digital transformation, and it is. We have all started talking about the impact of AI and Gen AI. I mean, that data center is going to be the home of that. Like it will be all residing in data centers, right? Now, yes, we manage, some data, but our customers also manage their own data, be it, and particularly the government and the public sectors and all. But there are also, what we do is basically we help customers' data to get stored in our data center, right?
True.
The responsibility of managing the data lies with the customer.
Yes.
Customer meaning the entity who has to derive the benefit of data. to kind of, to
Yes.
make business decisions, to drive their business, etc., etc. But one thing in the same context I want to kind of highlight over here, uh, certain aspects, around the data center business, right? Which is some statistics. I mean, I think I heard quite a number of statistics when I was sitting there. Uh, Till now, the total capacity, installed capacity in India for data center is approximately very near close to 800 megawatt. And what is expected, not even expected, I mean, it is actually, the installations are happening now. In the next 2 years, exactly the same megawatt will get added. Yeah, so it'll become double the capacity, which is approximately 1600 megawatt. I mean, plus minus 5-10% here and there, which will actually make India bigger than Singapore. Okay, so that is the kind of data. Yeah, I mean, that is the impact of data explosion on data center. Now, how this data will get managed, because most of the data which will be there will be unstructured data, and that's where the role of AI will come. The role of Gen AI will come. How you can best utilize this unstructured data, give some meaningful form factor to this data, and use this for business, use this for public service, use this for improving the life, improving the health, and improving many other aspects related to our personal life as well as the business.
So if I can add some color to this, when you spoke about structured data, unstructured data, let's look at how enterprises do it and how governments are trying to do it. I think the enterprise tech stack for this is fairly clear.
Yes.
At the ingestion layer, whether it's structured data, unstructured data, text, images, videos, whatever, being brought in, being harmonized, and then being used to run algorithms on it and eventually run applications on it, that tech stack is fairly clear. Enterprises do a reasonably good job of it. On the government side, because of the sheer volume and because there's a lot of catching up to do, it's still a long distance to go. I'll give you an example. Governments across the world, including in India, have been very progressive about open data initiatives. For example, India's own open government data, which is data.gov.in. If you look at it, they've got 151 sectors for which data is available there, APIs are available, visualization is available, but they're all silos. All the hard work has to be done by you to say, let me take this or let me take that. Now let me shift focus to what we are trying to do in the new initiative that I now chair. It's called the Open Geospatial Data Development and Promotion Committee. Here's what we're trying to do. This is a sector that got liberalized last year, and the committee's mandate is to draw up a blueprint for how this data can be made available and easily used by private sector and startups. Imagine there are what do we mean by geospatial data? Geospatial data means location intelligence. When we went to school and learned geography, for us, location meant latitude, longitude, and elevation and nothing more. But today, thanks to digital data, satellite data, remote sensing data, drone data, there's so much more intelligence that you can add to each location. It's not limited to latitude, longitude, and elevation. Imagine if you add all those features, look at the use cases. Let's take insurance as a sector. Today, when an insurer insures a large refinery or a factory, they only factor in some risk factors. Is it in an earthquake-prone zone? But imagine if you're able to pinpoint with accuracy that at that location, what is the probability of not just at that location, probability of earthquakes, landslides, fires, cyclones, any possible risk, how precisely can you ensure and do a much better job? So that's the kind of intelligence, location intelligence can bring to every sector. Financial services, agriculture, transportation. I'll give you another great example. On December 30th, there was the story and a big visual of there was a plane being sent for junking from Bombay to Assam. For whatever reason, Assam is the place where old planes get junked. So on a large trailer truck, this plane was mounted and it was being transported from Bombay to Assam. And the headline was that it got stuck inside a tunnel in Motihari district of Bihar. Why did that happen? because no one knew that the tunnel can only take a certain size of trailer. If you use a Google map, it will tell you a cycle route, car route, and a walking route, but not a truck route, for example. That is where location intelligence can transform the transportation sector. What we're trying to do in the Geospatial Committee is to take all the sources of data available in the government, whether it's with ISRO, whether it is with Department of Agriculture, Department of Water, Department of Soil, make all the data available in a single repository, but most important, create a UPI-like interface. We're calling it UGI, Unified Geospatial Interface, where depending on the use case you have, you will be able to access the right data sets to plan your transportation better, plan your insurance policies better. So at this stage, it's still part of a 15-year plan. I know today's Data Quest theme is 2047. I'm reasonably sure we'll get there by 2035. But we're still in year one of the planning. But I think this is a vision once again laid out by the Prime Minister. So we're at an early stage, but we'll get there soon.
Brilliant. So as you rightly mentioned, that you're sitting on this hub of data. So how difficult is the management from this perspective? Like, some tools, if you can share it.
Yeah, we haven't even started working on the tech stack yet. I'll tell you what we are doing right now. This is just my 4th month as the committee chair. Okay. Right now, what we're engaging, I come from the startup world where it says before you build the technology, do an MVP and do customer validation. So we're at that stage. Okay. So what we're doing right now, we're meeting all the data providers, which are primarily government agencies, to understand kiske paas kya data hai, kis format mein hai. We're meeting users from all the sectors we spoke about, transportation, agriculture, healthcare, livelihoods, to see who can come up with what kind of use cases. We will design the tech stack based on that. Our plan for this year is to make the data available in an offline mode, saying, okay, you are an agri-tech player. To improve crop yields in a certain place, you need certain kind of data which sits with something is sitting with meteorological department, something is sitting with agriculture department. Can we just get the data and give it to you? Prove it as a prototype that you can actually increase farm yields. Don't want to build a tech stack before we know that this is going to give us upsides actually. So we're still some distance away from even designing the tech stack, honestly.
So, talking about that single version of truth, when you're talking about so much data that needs to be accessed, we have to have that single version of truth. And that's where security plays a very important role. So your thoughts on how do we ensure this single version of truth and keeping security in mind too at the same time?
Yeah, as you have heard, Arvind's talking about security is the number one,
concern.
The concern for everyone, be it the government or enterprises or even from a consumer perspective, like, so see, when your data is lying in multiple places, and security, first of all, is with respect to the location where the data is getting stored, the media through which the data is flowing, and the device, in which data is there at the end point. Absolutely. Correct. This is one kind of security, right? Which has to be solved through technology. Second kind of data security, which is another word, maybe data privacy, which Arvind spoke about, okay, which is what happens to my data, right? Absolutely. Today, if you do an inquiry in CIBIL, what is your CIBIL score? I think after a few hours, you start getting calls from from at least 3 to 4 different entities, right? Yes. So the data privacy is something which is equally crucial. Absolutely. More and more digitalization happens, more and more it is online. This becomes very important. Secondly, the third is the data integrity. For example, with deepfake coming, and with so what is the data integrity? Somebody whose profile you can see or which video you see. How do you ensure that this is not fake? Correct. So security, authenticity of that. So you are talking about single truth, right? So it has got various dimensions. Now technology will solve some of these problems. Some of these other problems has to be solved by regulation. And I'm sure even with respect to technology, what is going to happen tomorrow or day after, technology is still under construction.
It's a work in progress.
It's a work in progress. Otherwise, the good news is that there is highest level of sensitivity, toward this subject. And to the extent that, I mean, as you all know, the financial services is one of the most dominant sector, which is driving a lot many other things which we are discussing today,
Yes.
and it's extremely important for the development of the country. Uh, they are coming with regulations. Let me give you a small example to explain this. The NBFCs, okay, the NBFCs were not as regulated as the banks,
Absolutely.
right, earlier.
It is
But-
very unstructured. Yes.
Correct. So, but the NBFCs are also coming very much under the RBI guidelines.
Absolutely.
They are getting audited. Right. Highly regulated, but NBFC was not as regulated
Yes.
as a bank, right? So this is the big change which we are seeing today. The NBFCs are coming under high regulation. We have seen one example in the recent past, correct? So this is extremely important. So these are very policy driven, regulation driven.
True.
So that is also another dimension of that, right?
Absolutely.
So it will have multiple dimensions. And IoT security, for example. Just imagine when you are talking about machines being kind of controlled or driven digitally,
Yes.
right? You can bring down a whole factory cyber terrorists can actually bring down the whole factory. Like that's a completely different dimension of security. So I think this discussion will go on and on.
True.
I try to give you some perspective,
So
here.
yes.
So on regulation security, in response to what you said, I cannot resist saying this. Today, I believe that the government is probably the most liberal when it comes to sharing data. Private sector is not. And I'll give you a joke. Last month, I was at this conference of geospatial companies, where various companies from transportation sector were there, including some of the most popular car riding companies that you know. So they were talking about government should give us this data, that data into the repository. I said that will be made available. Then I asked them a question. To improve the quality of the intelligence, are you willing to share your data also into this repository? And there was stunned silence, actually.
So there used to be a joke amongst the compliance officers in most of these NBFCs and the unregulated sector that has become like a Friday release. That every Friday evening they would have something coming up and a compliance to be abide and adhered by, and the weekends would go for a toss. And it would be like, we are waiting for the Friday release and we have to be on our toes to see how much of compliance and regulation needs to be adhered to. Yes. So, you rightly mentioned, Kamal, that about the data center evolution, that we are seeing a rampant usage and a rampant growth in the data center space, with more and more mushrooming all over the place. So do you think India is going to be and is ready to be the data center nation for the world?
See, I mean, personally speaking, if I look from my company's perspective, we had set up, our first data center in Navi Mumbai in the year 2000
Yes.
for India's first commercial data center. And so I don't know whether you know that the some of the infrastructure what we created, those were the HPs,
systems, yes.
HP systems. So this is interesting. But that data center, the total capacity of the data center was 0.9 megawatt. Huh? Yeah. So yeah, correct. So we started the first data center business in India. But today, if you really see, I mean, I'll give you a few examples. Earlier days, and from an enterprise perspective, right?
Yes.
Then I will come to the hyperscale
Yes.
perspective, who is making a lot of difference for this sector.
And then to edge maybe.
And of course to the edge. So of course to the edge.
Yes.
So number one, every bank today, they are creating availability zones in every city where they are putting a data center. So the availability zone concept was purely an hyperscaler concept, that if they have one data center in one city, they will have one or two more in that same city, right?
True.
Today, the banks, because of regulatory reasons, okay, they are setting up one more data center at least in every city. I'm just giving you an example. So why? Because earlier days, the banking system used to run on core banking system, right? We used to go to the branch, withdraw
Absolutely,
money,
yes,
give check
yes.
and all these things. Today, the popular media is UPI, correct?
Yes.
So can UPI be down? Okay, we manage the network and network security infrastructure of State Bank of India. You will not believe if UPI transaction rate goes above a certain limit,
Fraction of second.
okay, the trigger goes to the SBI chairman, and moment it happens, within some less than 15 minutes it comes to me, because we are managing that. I mean, the network and network security infrastructure of that data center. Correct. I'm just giving you the example. Now, technology will fail, right? But the question is how you can completely build a completely redundant technology system so that there is no disruption. Correct. Easier said than done. So that is one growth area, right? Number one. Number two, we used to talk about disaster recovery. Disaster recovery is not sufficient. Today, we all, the business wants business continuity. Correct. Your business cannot fail. And during pandemic and post-pandemic, it took a completely different meaning.
Yes.
The next one is the hyperscalers. Like definitely the hyperscaler and cloud service providers, Indian cloud service providers, they are more than 50%, 50 to 60% of data center consumption in India is done by them, right? Now, we as consumers or businesses, right, we consume data center either in the form of cloud or in the form of the real data center space,
Yes,
space and power,
yes.
right? And what is going to happen now is a very interesting statistic. Singapore, the data center growth in Singapore. So China is the largest in Asia,
Yes.
right? Data center growth in Singapore has got little slowed down, is because of the lack of space, and with introduction of renewable energy, it requires a lot of space to create those solar generation plants, right? And they don't have space. And what I'm hearing is that they will create a different island, where
just house the data
to
centers.
house the data centers and the surrounding ecosystem. Right. So exactly. So India doesn't have a problem.
True.
So India today, most of the data centers are in some of the cities, Mumbai, Chennai, Noida, Delhi,
Yes.
NCR is not Delhi exactly. I think Noida is coming in a very big way.
True.
All of us know. Hyderabad, Bangalore. There's a huge, headroom for growth in at least in the B category cities. Okay. There's only one factor which needs to get fixed. It is apart from the quality of power, of course, is the fiber network in the country. Reliable fiber network is required, because
That's
data
the
centers need to be
challenge.
always remain connected. Now that is one part. These are all for applications and workloads which need to be in a central data center. But with more and more digitalization happening at the edge, digitalization at the edge is actually moving much faster than the digitalization in the core, right? So we will see the growth of edge data centers, right? We are all discussing today, but it is 100% going to happen. And moment the AI and generative AI will really take a formidable shape in India. That will completely trigger off, and the 5G is definitely going to speed it up with 5G, because not every data need to come to the central location.
Absolutely.
There are a lot of data, like data of a hospital, data of a say a factory. They need not come back at the central location. And every time you get all the data in a central location, your security threat is more. So it is better to keep data distributed, even from a security perspective.
So, Srikant sir, so I think we are kind of nearing the conversation. So, talking about providing intelligence, he did touch upon AI. And so, what's your take on seeing the usage of these kind of intelligent tools to bring some sanity and bring some insight, especially with your kind of data, which you need to make it available to public, and then also see predictively what's happening in the future?
So, in the data that we're dealing with in the Geospatial Committee, I think we're far removed from people using generative AI, because this data is going to become available for the first time. But I'll talk about from another perspective.
Yes.
I mentor a lot of early stage startups which are creating AI or generative AI based startup. For example, one of them does AI generated music. Someone else does AI generated videos. What I'm seeing is a lot of this is obviously fun stuff, consumer stuff. But on the enterprise side, what is the adoption? There are two areas where you're seeing early adoption. Enterprises are obviously concerned about saying, if I bring this in, do I run the risk of deep fakes? Do I run the risk of copyright infringement? They're slow to adopt. But the two areas where there's early adoption, one is to improve customer service. For example, conversational chatbots, for example, no brainer. You can bring that in, improve efficiency in your workflow, etc. Second is personalized marketing. I mean, take some of the big e-commerce companies. Traditionally, they've inundated us, spammed us with emails saying, buy this, buy that, there's an offer. But now imagine they're sending personalized videos targeting you, Minu, based on what you may have purchased in the past. Is someone talking to you, the ability to do that at scale. So personalized marketing is another area where you see early adoption happening, for example. So those are two things I would call out. But with respect to geospatial data, we're far away from it. People are just beginning to define use cases. But I'm bringing my experience from the startup mentoring world to talk about two things that I've seen in generative AI.
So any other comment on how to handle this data explosion? If you all would have some closing remarks, and then maybe we could open the floor for
I'm just going to make two
Yes.
comments from the standpoint of the role that I'm playing in the government. We're very clear that like everything else in India, India is super ambitious in this space. The ambition is to be a world leader. In 2022, in global ranking for use of geospatial data and knowledge, India was ranked number 27. So we've kept a goal that by 2024, we want to be in the top 15, and by end of 2030, be among the top 3, for example. And we'll hopefully get there, but I think the shorter term goal is to see, can we use this data and make it available to everyone so that our transportation and logistics can be more efficient, costs brought down, agriculture can be used more, there can be precision agriculture to improve the yields, insurance can do a better job. All of that together can bring economic value to the society at large. I think that's a big goal. Ranking number 1 globally is more like a vanity metric, but that also will happen actually.
Yeah, so I think data explosion, if managed well, that leads to very fast growth of data economy. I think the only way India can reach where it is expected or it is desired to reach is through data economy, right? So to that extent, I guess the way the data are managed, data will be managed, or rather, how data can be meaningfully used,
yes.
right, to drive this growth. There are various kind of use cases. I think there is no end to use cases. I mean, it only needs imagination, to kind of, to state what can be various kind of use cases. And all the startup companies are actually, imagining, that which are the problems which they have to solve,
Absolutely.
which has remained, unsolved or unresolved for many decades, right? So I think it is a combination. It is a joint play between government, enterprises, service providers, regulators, and of course, I mean the main actors, which are the consumers.
Yes. Thank you. So if we have any questions for our esteemed speakers. Yes, sir, please. Could you help with the mic there, please?
We are seeing that a lot of innovations are coming as far as semiconductors are concerned, with a lot of, these firms like NVIDIA, Intel, etc., coming up with a lot of chips, high-end chips for artificial intelligence, for better, for these data centers, etc. So how do you see that the capital expenditure going forward for these, data centers going forward? Because the innovation cycles are going to get a lot more shorter, and they will need to update themselves for, update their hardware for this, and because a lot of their, customers, for example, in finance, healthcare, education, etc., will require, a lot of, advanced, applications and advanced solutions for that. So how do you see the operating expenditure and capital expenditure going forward?
A very good question, actually. So with NVIDIA and the other chip makers, there are two parts of it. So they are, how their valuation and stocks are growing, correct? Just because of the fact that, a lot of businesses will be dependent on them, and hence they will sell more, number one. Number two, this is in a very early stage as far as India is concerned, and even globally also, I mean, with respect to what can happen in the future. So like cloud, if you recollect, earlier, customers used to buy a lot of infrastructure themselves, correct? To run their business, to, host their application on that infrastructure. And then came the cloud providers. India has already started seeing early signs of these AI or the GPUs, GPUs which will be hosted in data center like ours. Okay, we may also do that, but what I have read, in the public, in the publicly, available media, is that there are, Reliance Jio. They will be creating, in partnership with NVIDIA, these GPU data centers. So we'll also do it. I mean, I'm sure almost all the data center providers have to do it to create data centers which are only for AI workloads. Correct. Where GPU will be available GPU will be available as a service.
As a service,
right?
Yes.
Because a lot of this LLM, workload will run on this, right? LLM you are only learning, right? And to convert that into a real business model, that will take a little different dimension in a little different form factor, because those workloads need to be closer to the users, right? Closer to the use cases.
Yes.
And in that case, probably, once it is learned, it may get deployed on the edge data centers,
yes.
depending on what the use case
I
is.
was just going to add, then the obvious way would be to maybe move to the
Correct.
edge.
So in a nutshell, you will find GPU as a service coming, but yes, the supply and the demand gap is something, a challenge, which we'll see, how it emerges. And Intel and other chip companies are also today,
So we can quickly just have one more question, and then we can close this explosion. Great. So thank you so much. We all are talking about the positive data explosion. We have heard that India is poised on this tech superpower road, and data is a very incremental role to that. So thank you so much, gentlemen, for your time and the great insights.
Thank you.